Hi, everyone. Today, I'm just going to go through some of the general feedback from the trial exam that you guys did in the holiday. And yeah, just give you guys some things to look out for, some tips, and just some general final advice because we are literally 1 week away from the health exam. So yeah, just to check in with you guys and see how you're going. So I'll just get started. As you guys can notice, I have lost my voice as well. So this is going to sound really disgusting on the recording, but it doesn't matter as long as you can understand what I'm saying. So just some general feedback before we begin, guys. So the average score for the holiday HHD trial exam was 40%. Now, that might seem really low at first glance, but we need to remember that it can be attributed to many different factors. Number one, and a lot of you mentioned this as well in class, I remember you said that, you were all kind of dead. You were all exhausted by the end of that exam period. HHD was literally the last exam on that Friday in the last two periods. And so that could have contributed to a lot of a lack of motivation. As I was marking the exams, especially for some people, more than half the paper was left blank. So too many questions being left blank, especially higher mark questions like, as I'm going to talk about later, the 10-mark question. That also contributed to a big loss of marks across the board. Some of you, I could tell, were kind of waffling for some of the questions, giving irrelevant responses, so that automatically led you to lose marks. In some of the data analysis questions, some of you didn't incorporate numerical data, even when it specifically asked you to use data or to refer to the data. And something that I'm seeing across the board as well, for some of you, not all of you, is that you're still kind of struggling to link back to human development in a meaningful way in certain questions. So I'm going to talk about human development a bit. I'm going to include that image that you guys took from the board. Remember when we brainstormed the different keywords? So I've included that in this PowerPoint for you guys to just have there on the side when you do questions relating to human development. So that's just some general feedback. So going through some more specific errors, I've just divided it into errors in Unit 3 content and then errors in Unit 4. So if we look at Unit 3, guys, the first question itself was about social health and well-being and the dimensions. So when we talk about social health and well-being, we're basically talking about this idea that it is about relationships for sure, but it's also about how you engage yourself in the community. It's also about how you participate in your community in an independent and cooperative way. And so a lot of you didn't actually acknowledge that idea. You only talked about relationships and communication, but you didn't talk about the idea that it's also about how a person immerses themselves in their society or their community. So that was one thing that I wanted to point out. The second thing I wanted to point out was that health needs to be looked at as a global resource. So a lot of you struggled with this question. Whenever it says health as a global resource, you need to talk about how health can be used to interconnect countries on a global or international level, because global means international. So you need to be able to link back to anything that gives us an idea of how global health is being achieved. So that could be something like increased world trade. Countries are trading more with each other, more tourism, so people are going to different countries around the world, even something like increased gross national income or GNI, which we often use as an indicator to compare one country's health status to another country's. So that was another thing. Whenever you see the word global resource, link it back to some kind of international indicator. Okay. The next thing that you needed to talk about was Medicare. Okay, a lot of you, for some reason, in the Medicare question, talked about how Medicare covers the cost of essential medication. So you mixed up Medicare and PBS. Just be careful there. Medicare doesn't actually cover any kind of medication. It only covers essential health services. And a lot of you mentioned, oh, Medicare is available to all Australians, which is also incorrect. Medicare is not available to all Australians. It's only available to Australian citizens and permanent residents. Okay. Finally, a lot of you kept saying that Medicare is free or Medicare is free healthcare. That's actually incorrect as well. You got to use the word subsidized. Subsidized means provided at a lower cost. It's not free, but essentially it is little to no out of pocket cost. Okay, obviously it's not free because we do pay that 2% Medicare levy through our taxable income, if you remember. Okay, so it's not actually technically free. So just be careful they're using words like that. Another point of concern was that a lot of you for old public health kept saying that, old public health could prevent the development of diseases like measles because of the fact that vaccines were created as a part of old public health, or the fact that vaccines were discovered. That's wrong. Vaccines were actually discovered way before old public health came into the picture. But the thing is, that old public health led to mass vaccinations, led to this idea that we took something that was already there, which was vaccines, and we basically were able to deliver these vaccines at a mass level. So getting like entire schools of children to come in and get vaccinations, very similarly to how vaccines run nowadays, okay? Vaccines are, for example, delivered to multiple schools in this area on the same day. And so we're vaccinating a mass amount of people at once. So don't say discovery of vaccines, that's wrong. Say mass vaccinations. Some of you also kept talking about the idea that new public health is about prevention and that sanitation can actually prevent diseases from happening, which, look, that's not completely wrong, but new public health isn't what sanitation is. It's not all about sanitation. Sanitation actually comes under the banner of old public health. Remember when we were cleaning up the streets, getting rid of all the rats, cleaning the pollution, getting people to actually, go toilet in proper fitted toilets as opposed to just urinating in the street. So that's a part of old public health. So very important to remember that, guys. Okay. So another part of Unit 3 that some of you struggled with was the Australian Dietary Guidelines. And I remember this was also an issue on the SAC. I think all of you and across the board and across the state, VCA continuously talk about the idea that students do not study the Australian Dietary Guidelines well enough. This was also evident because a lot of you actually skipped this question. So I really urge you guys to study this topic well. I know it's a very draining topic, especially because those guidelines are kind of hard to remember, but just try to also, that's not actually the reason a lot of you lost marks for this question. A lot of you lost marks because you went from A to C. Okay. What I mean by that is you said that, okay, foods that are high in saturated fat lead to obesity. So you talked about the link between A and C, and you forgot to talk about the middle link, which was the B. You forgot to talk about the biological link. Okay. You need to say that saturated fats or foods that are high in saturated fats, for example, pizza, have a lot of calories. They're very energy dense. Okay. They're full of calories. And when you eat a lot of that and you don't exercise, that starts to contribute to weight gain and, the storage of fat in the body. And that is what then leads to the formation of obesity or the development of obesity or becoming overweight. So you need to explain that biological link. Okay. And that's where a lot of you lost marks. If you're asked to relate something back to burden of disease, you must link it back to YLL or YLD. Okay, you can't just say increased burden of disease or decreased burden of disease. You must link it back to one of those indicators or two of those indicators, depending on what the question is asking you, okay, and how many marks it's worth. Finally, when explaining how NDIS promotes access, don't just say that NDIS values and gives opportunities for people with disabilities. Okay, you need to be more specific than that. You need to link back to a specific component of the NDIS. So you might say something like NDIS allows for individualized plans. Okay, so for example, we create a plan for that individual person that allows them to get the support that they need. Specifically, it's really important that you link back to the idea that NDIS will personalize and tailor the support that they give to the patient and they'll do whatever they can to allow that person to live an ordinary life. Okay. And in other words, we're basically empowering that person by simply giving them a wheelchair or a motorized scooter or some kind of accommodation that's easy for them to move around the house. We are empowering those people to live an ordinary life and to be more than just their physical disability or their physical impediment. Okay, so that's really important to talk about that. A lot of you, NDI, when talking about NDIS in that question and linking it back to access, you just talked about the idea that, oh, we're giving them equal opportunities. And even that is wrong. It's not really equal opportunities. I would rather use the word equitable opportunities, okay? Because the main idea of an individualized plan is that not every single person that has a disability has an equal amount of disability. Okay, some people have very mild disability, some people have very severe disability. So it's better to use the word equitable always. And I'll talk about this as well in the Unit 4 errors slide on the next slide. So those were all the errors that you guys kind of made in Unit 3 and the main kind of glaring issues in Unit 3, guys. So let's move on to Unit 4. Unit 4, with the climate change question, a lot of you didn't link back to a specific aspect of climate change or a specific implication of climate change. You always need to link back to something like rising sea levels or extreme weather events. And if it's a higher mark question, you might actually link back to more than one of those, okay? So that's really important for you to remember. When you discuss climate change, you don't just discuss things like greenhouse gases or, the greenhouse effect or the warming of the Earth's surface. You also link that back to other things, like the fact that the warming of the Earth's surface is contributing to rising sea levels, which is causing a lot of houses that are near coastal areas or near seas to actually be submerged underwater. And these people are actually becoming displaced because of that. And we know what are some of the issues when people become displaced or are asked to leave their homes. Okay, they technically become internally displaced peoples, okay, similar to refugees and asylum seekers. They need to go and find another home. Okay, so it's very important for you guys to not just think about it from an environmental perspective, but think about the implications. What are the effects that people are having on their health and well-being as a result of the climate change and all the problematic issues that it brings up? Link back to the keywords or phrases in the human development definition, but also just make sure you contextualize those phrases in your answer. So don't just like chuck develop to your full potential, enhance capabilities, access to knowledge. Don't just chuck that into your answer, but actually incorporate that into your answer in a way that makes sense with what you're talking about. For example, a good way to do that would be if you're linking back to education, you might link back to the idea that by going to school, the girl in the scenario is able to develop literacy skills, which actually is a way for her to enhance her capabilities. And going to school provides her with access to knowledge. So you see how linking to those two key words from the human development definition, which is access to knowledge and enhance your capabilities, it's directly related to that idea of going to school and getting an education, okay? That doesn't mean that you can just chuck those words into any scenario or any context, okay? You've got to contextualize it and choose the best human development keyword for that scenario that you're working with, okay? And I'll show you guys some of those keywords in the next slide that we've already been going through. If you're asked to relate something back to SDG 3, you must link back to one of those 3 key features. I kept going through this in class as well. Remember, every time we had a SDG 3 question, I would always like write those 3 things on the board every time. Okay, you must link back to one of those 3 key features. That's what VCA looks for. So either maternal and child health, communicable disease, and non-communicable disease. Okay, any of those 3. Under these banners, you also need to link back to a specific condition. So if you're linking back to the key feature of communicable disease, you might bring up examples relating to HIV/AIDS. You might bring up examples relating to malaria. Okay, all of those things. Non-communicable disease, you might link back to things like mental health issues. You might link back to things like road traffic accidents, any of those issues that we learned about underneath the non-communicable disease banner. And maternal and child health, you might link back to infections that children might get. You might link back to birth complications, obstructed labor, hemorrhage, any of those kind of complications that women go through. And remember, it's always better to specifically name one of those complications, like name hemorrhage, as opposed to just saying complications in general. Okay, it's always better to give a specific example. It just shows that your knowledge is a little bit deeper there. As I said in the previous slide, equality and equity are concepts that cover both units 3 and 4. And it's important that you understand that they're not the same thing. They're not interchangeable synonyms for each other. They are two different concepts. So equality is giving everyone the same amount of a resource or a facility or service, regardless of their current starting point. Equity is looking at everyone's starting point and giving them what they need. And equity is always better because sometimes some people need more of something than another person does. Okay, so equity is very different from equality. So don't confuse those two words. This question, which was about the WHO, a lot of you struggle to do this question. And I think it's because you didn't understand what was meant by the work of the WHO. Whenever Vika used the word work of the WHO, or whenever you see that in an exam question, it means that you need to link back to those annoying 6 core functions. Remember the really long ones like provide research and health and wellbeing information and all of those different ones? You got to link back to those 6. You're not linking back to those 3 priorities like, promoting healthier populations and all that stuff. You're not linking back to those. Those are the priorities. Those are different. The 6 core functions are what make up the work of the WHO. So that's what you need to be linking back to. Okay. Also, some of you got mixed up between the dimensions of the Human Development Index and the indicators. Remember, the dimensions are the broader concept. So for example, a long and healthy life, and the indicators are what we use to measure that. So the indicator for a long and healthy life for the Human Development Index is life expectancy at birth. Okay. Similarly, decent standard of living is the dimension of the HDI, and how we measure that is the gross national income per capita. So that's kind of like the indicator is the more specific way that we measure that dimension. Okay. In any question, guys, don't use the same concept twice. So some of you wrote the same key feature for the question that asked you to compare high, middle, and low income countries. So don't say, for example, lower educational levels, lower literacy rates. That's kind of the same thing. Similarly, don't say something like lower average incomes and lower gross national income. They might be slightly different in terms of how they're defined, but they're still kind of referring to the same concept. On that note as well, guys, when you're asked to link back to health status in a question, and a lot of you don't do this, but I'm just putting it out there, don't use the same health status indicator twice. So don't say blah, 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 this affects morbidity, and then say morbidity again in the same question. You will only get marked 2 out of 4. You'll only get marked for the first one if you do that. So just be really careful there. Okay. Also, in the question about social sustainability, a lot of you started talking about social health and well-being as a dimension, which is wrong. Anything with social sustainability, you've got to talk about how, or any type of sustainability for that matter, you need to talk about how future generations will be impacted or benefited by achieving that type of sustainability. So that's very important for you guys to mention, okay? Make some link to how the future generations in that community or that society will benefit, as well as just link back to that specific dimension. So social sustainability, we put a big focus on equal opportunities or equitable opportunities. We put a big focus on empowerment and education and enhancing people's capabilities. So social sustainability is basically about improving the social development of people within society. Environmental sustainability, you're just linking back to environmental resources, and what's the other one? Economic sustainability, you're linking back to finances and the management of money and all that kind of stuff into the future. So that's kind of the main key things that you guys kind of struggled with a little bit in Unit 4 in terms of that holiday trial exam. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is I've just put this picture of this image that I took back when we did this little brainstorm on the board relating to human development. So you guys can see the different keywords. It's not just about knowing these keywords, but like I said before, it's about contextualizing them and putting them into the scenario appropriately. Okay, not just chucking in develop to full potential, but using that in the correct way. Okay, because that's what Vika are looking at. They're not just looking at your ability to just memorize these blindly, but they're looking at your ability to kind of weave them into your question, weave them into the scenario. And that's why I say, guys, as many as you can remember would be ideal. I don't put a number to this. I don't say learn 1 or 2. Try to remember as many as you can, at least bare minimum learn at least 4. Okay, because you never know what scenario you're going to get. You never know. Maybe the ones that you've learned don't fit the scenario or don't fit the context that you want them to be in. So always try to learn as many as you can. Remember, they're just little buzzwords. They're just 3 or 4 words long each. So if you can learn at least a few of those phrases, it will be really good for you guys, especially because I find that linking back to human development has been something a lot of you have been struggling with compared to health. You guys are amazing at linking back to dimensions of health and well-being, PMS. You're really good at linking back to health status. But when it comes to linking back to human development, that's where a lot of you struggle. So this is where we need to really practice questions like this and practice weaving in these key phrases and keywords. Okay. This was a big issue. Like I said at the beginning, one of the reasons the average score for the exam was 40% was because automatically, right off the bat, you lost 10 marks. Any of you who left that 10-mark question blank, straight off the bat, you've lost those 10 marks. Okay. Now, this is from the VCA assessment report of 2021 from last year's exam. Okay. They said that most students who attempted the 10-mark question gained some marks. Now, what does that mean? That actually means that people who wrote something, even if it was maybe a little bit waffle here and there, even if it was maybe not 100% perfect, still got some marks. Okay. Now, I haven't put in the average mark for last year's 10 marker, but I do remember it off the top of my head. So I'll write it on this slide. It was actually, I think, 2.6 out of 10. That is really low. Okay, that is an extremely low 10-mark question. Those of you who do psychology, that is even lower than the normal average we have for the psychology 10-mark question. Okay, that means that if you write something for the 10-mark question, chances are, because the rest of the state is doing so crap in it and leaving it blank, if you write something, you can actually do really well. Okay, and your response will actually be valued and read and given a mark. Okay, you won't get 0, in other words, as long as you've written something that resembles what the question is asking. So please, guys, do not leave the 10-mark question blank in the exam. Okay, you may actually do better in that 10 marker than you think. Just attempt it. Do not leave it blank. Okay. One of the reasons I think many people are intimidated by 10-mark question is because of this idea that a lot of you might think that, oh, I've got to write an essay. You don't have to write an essay, okay? It's not an English essay. You can just write an extended response. You can break that down into nice paragraphs, nice chunks, nice subheadings based on what the question is asking you, okay? Now, I want to acknowledge the people that did attempt the 10-mark question in our holiday trial exam, because those of you who did do that 10-marker, even if it was just a very half-hearted effort, even if it wasn't like the best that you could have done, you still achieved really well, okay? The only place you lost marks for was by not linking back to health status indicators or not making enough links between sources, but majority of you did get way above 2 or 3 out of 10. So those of you who did attempt it did well. So I want you guys to continue that, okay? One thing I would suggest to everyone is, if you want to do really well on the 10 marker and you want to go above just getting 2 out of 10, just make sure you actually quote or you actually interweave the data or information directly from the sources that are given. Okay. So you might quote a statistic from source 1. You might write a little sentence or part of a sentence of source 3 that relates to the question. So that's really important for you guys to be able to do that. Okay. And you're using that as evidence to basically back up your explanations and your responses. So it's really, really important that we get into the habit of doing that. And you are given marks for integrating the stimulus material. That's what that means. It means that you're quoting information from the sources there. So that's just my advice on the 10 marker, guys. Please attempt it and look at the question, look at what it's asking you. And there's no way you can go wrong because, as I said, many students don't attempt it. You want to be the student that stands out and the student that does attempt it, and try your best. Okay. Alrighty, so on to the last slide, guys. Just some final advice. Next week, as you know, Tuesday is Melbourne Cup holiday, so the usual double period we would have for health is again taken away from us, unfortunately. I am happy to run Zooms with you guys anytime during the week. Obviously, please let me know well beforehand if you want me to run a Zoom with you, because again, we'd have to schedule it in between my classes and yeah, as well as any other sessions or any other teachers that you're meeting up with as well. So just let me know. Ideally, if you want to come into school on Monday, I suppose you can. But I know many of you do psychology exam as well as I think further exams also on Monday. So I don't really want to obligate anyone to come if you've got exams on that day. But please let me know, guys, if you have any questions, just email me. I'm more than happy to help you out. Okay. Do the trial exams from the drive. I did post the link to the drive on the social stream and I emailed it to you guys last night as well again. But please do the trial exams from the drive, but please prioritize doing the actual past VCA exams. Those are the most important. Those are the most reliable in terms of the questions that you get. And honestly speaking, HHD exams have been pretty good. They're not really ambiguous. They are pretty straightforward. And so doing those exams and reading through the VCA assessment report for each exam is really, really essential. Okay. It also gives you a little bit of a confidence boost. For example, you might do a question that's worth 2 marks and you might get 2 marks out of 2. You go back to the assessment report and you realize that the average was 1 point something. So that means you're already above the state. Okay. So it's really good, guys, to read through those assessment reports. Obviously, if you want any trial exams printed, please just email me the name of the specific one and the year, and I can print that from the drive. Or if you want a VCA one printed, just let me know which year it is and I'll print it off for you. And then you can come into school and pick that up whenever you're in school next. Okay. Lastly, if you've done any exams already and you want them marked, please submit them to me for marking. You can either scan it through and email it to me, and I can print that out, mark it and scan it and email it back to you. Or you can just drop off your physical copy at school and I'm happy to mark it. At the moment, you guys are my priority. Okay. I really will try my best to get that back to you within the next day. So like, I won't be spending more time than that. Okay. I'm not going to delay it because you guys are my priority. I need to get those exams back to you ASAP so that you can go over that and so that you can see where you've made your mistakes. Okay. But please let me know if you guys don't tell me what you're struggling with, I won't be able to help you. So please let me know what you need help with. And yeah, if you need me to run a Zoom last minute, I'm happy to run a Zoom with you, happy to help you after school, as long as I don't have any meetings as well. Yeah. And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say. So all the best for the rest of your exams, guys. I know health is still 1 week away, but time will fly. So please just remember to study for health. Okay. And yeah, inshallah, hopefully I'm expecting to receive some exams and some good questions from you guys in the next few days. So all the best for what remains for your exam revision and the rest of your exams. And I will see you guys hopefully soon. Bye.